have a replay of this. Hi, everyone. I'm Hildy Weissert, and this the third workshop with Thad Kubis is presented by the Sandusfield Arts Center because we can't do it in person, but we're doing it live. The first two, I know some of you came to those, were just wonderful on controls and mastering your camera composition. Thad is widely shown all over, teaches at IS 181, is a master photographer, as you will see demonstrated today. So Thad, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm going to, you're going to share.
Do a screen share?
Yep.
Let's see, why isn't this working? Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, excellent, good. Up, and
Yes.
go back one. Yep, here we go. Get rid of those subtitles, things. There we go. All right, so you could certainly ask questions during this presentation if you like, or there's plenty of time at the end for questions to be asked. And I'm going to begin. So we're going to be talking about things that relate in the Berkshires that are unique. We have unique sunsets, we have unique sunrises, and we're about to enter an incredible period of time where we're going to have unique fall colors. So what I'm going to do is I've broken this presentation into 3 segments, and we're going to talk about sunsets first, then sunrises, and then fall photography. And what I'm going to also do at the very end is to actually edit some images online so you can see how easy it is to change the overall color, the view, the impression, the impact of an image. And like I said, if you want to ask questions during it, please just let me know and we'll move forward. Okay, so let's see. So one of the things you got to be aware of, and this is something that is not a, I hate to use the word, is not a blind warning, but what it is when we look directly at the sun with our eyes, after a little bit of time, our eyes are going to sort of shut themselves off, or we're going to get this little gaze. When you look at the sun, either the sunrise or the sunset, with a camera, with a long lens, or with a high-powered telescope, you could damage your eyes. You certainly damage the sensors. So when you're doing this, the last thing you want to do is stare at the sun for great amounts of time. And there are a couple of ways around that, which I'm going to explain to you. I just don't want anyone to find out next week that they're blind and they're tapping on my door saying, I need your help. It's not much I can do. Anyway, so, all right. So this is your traditional auto exposure sunset from Baldwin Hill in Great Barrington. And this has a couple of components to it, which we're going to talk about in detail. Number one, we're talking about the position of the sun, both in sunrises and sunsets. We're going to talk about the foreground, the background, but more importantly, we're going to talk about when sunset actually occurs. So sunset is not when the sun is still visible in the sky. The actual definition is when the top of the disk is below the horizon. Now, your horizon might be different from my horizon. So if you're in a valley, that sun is going to be behind the mountain earlier than it is if I live on a field area. But my sunset and your sunset are really measured as when it passes the horizon. And I'll tell you why that's important. We're going to get to that in a second. And I'll also explain to you how you can easily find that out and figure out the location as well. But the key is when the top of the disk goes below the horizon, not below what is blocking the horizon for you. Okay. So here's how the whole thing starts. Number one, you need to select a location. Locally, there are dozens of locations. Some of my favorites are in Northern Connecticut, Mount Riga. Over in Richmond, or just on the border of Richmond and Stockbridge, is Olivia's Overlook. And then you've got Herbert's Hill, which is part of Barnes-Cobble, and you got Baldwin Hill just outside of Egremont. Those three have one thing in common. They have a higher elevation than a valley. Not that the valleys are wrong, but they have a higher elevation. So there are, again, endless locations. I was up at Mount Greylock a couple of weeks ago taking some pictures, another great location. On Monday, I was at Mount Washington in New Hampshire. Now, they close down at 5 o'clock, so you can't see sunsets, but that would be an incredibly impressive place to see a sunset. So how do you determine sunset time? I'm going to get into that in great detail. Another thing you have to be aware of, it is always great to prepare. So I will go over preparation, the kind of equipment that you want to do, checking in equipment, using tripods. A lot of people don't have tripods, but for sunsets, it's really an important aspect of it. I'm a big note taker. I take notes on all the images that I take, and I keep those notes to reference. So I would suggest that. And you're going to need a smartphone because some of the applications that I'm going to be talking about are only available via a smartphone, a tablet, or a laptop. So this is, again, an important aspect of it. Sunset is not as simple as being just when the sun, the top of the sun touches the horizon. It depends on a lot of different things, and particularly where you are. So where we are, we're at 42 degrees latitude, roughly 42 degrees latitude. We literally have about 9 different stages of sunset and sunrise throughout the year. The closer you get to the equator, you have less and less stages. So typically in Brazil, where the equator, well, in South America, where the equator divides a continent, you might have 3 or 4 levels of sunset and sunrises or stages, where here we may have as many as 15 to 18. But there are 3 stages that you should be aware of. The first one is what we call civil twilight. Civil twilight, as its definition indicates, the sun disappears below the horizon and reaches 6 degrees below. 6 degrees is basically, if you have your hand and you put your hand out, spread like this out to the sky, try to do that, and your finger is touching the horizon, 6 degrees is roughly about the thumb to your index finger. So when the sun is technically that far below the sunrise, the horizon, we call that civil twilight. Gorgeous time, spectacular time, very, very exciting, very, very nice colors. Nautical is when that is an additional the sun is additional 6 degrees below the horizon, and you start to get this incredible blue, midnight blue, purple type of color in the upper sky, and the glow is basically coming only from around where the disk went below the horizon. And then true, what they call true astronomical twilight, is when the sun is well below the horizon and you've got this very, very soft glow. Each one of these stages gives you a different impact and a different effect. And I'll say this now, and I'll say this at the end. If you send me your email address, and I'll give you my email address later, I'll send you a cheat sheet on this presentation, okay? So how do you measure? How do we all do this? So I live in Sheffield, and I use this app called TPE. And what TPE does, it is an app that is available for free, or was available for free, and it tracks wherever you go. So no matter where I open up my app, because I have it on tracking, it will tell me not only where I am, it'll give me latitude and longitude and a bunch of other information, but it'll also give me the idea of when civil, nautical, and astronomical twilights will occur, when the sun is going to set, where the sun rose, if you want to do sunrises, where the moon is going to rise, where the moon is going to set. It gives you this virtual reality projection where you could hold the phone up to the sky and align yourself with a compass heading, and you will see where all the stars are going to appear. It's an extremely valuable and a viable application to have. I use it all the time. And I tell people it's important to know where the sun is for a lot of reasons, because even if you're shooting something in your own backyard, if the sun is to your back, then your shadow is going to sort of be like the Umberto del Serra, the Italian Etruscan statue, where your shadow is interfering with the imagery. So knowing where the sun is a key element. Also, TPE gives you a compass heading. So if you've ever been to Baldwin Hill to photograph the sunset, a lot of people are down lower than the top of the hill and are looking in the wrong position, because the sunset they think is going to be in a certain location, Well, TPE, it gives you a compass heading. And on your iPhone or any smartphone, you have an automatic compass that if you open up, you could literally line your camera up to the sunset. And that takes away a lot of the staring at the sun because you're in the general direction to begin with. There are devices for tripods that you could screw on top of the dial in. You could dial in the heading, and literally you could aim directly at where the sun is going to be. But this one app gives you a tremendous amount of tools to use, and it's just a fun app. I mean, to me, there's so much. I get enjoyment out of just knowing where things are. So this is sort of cool for me. If you want to get to a greater understanding of estimating where the sun is and how fast it's moving down, this link, which again is going to be in the cheat sheet, explains what they call the Roman salute. And the Roman salute is, as I said before, you put your hand up, spread it out, you put your thumb on the horizon, not the top of the mountain near you, but where you estimate the horizon to be. And basically, these are all about 5 degrees apart. So you have about a 20 or 25 degree, depending on your hand size. When you're holding at the horizon, if the sun was at the top here, for me, that's about 20 degrees. So I know that 20 degrees is going to take probably about 8 or 10 minutes for it to start to visibly move. So this link explains a step-by-step tutorial on how to measure your own degrees. And it's important to know for a couple purposes, because if you are photographing sunrises and you're not really sure where the time of day is or where the sun's going to be, and the TPE isn't helpful, you could estimate by using your hand and using your pinky on the horizon and then measuring where you expect the sun to be and how long the sun will take to rise. So there's all these little tools that help you do that, okay? TPE also not only gives you all the different time zones and all the different times, it actually will calculate for you where, what is the rate of descent or the rate of ascent of the sun. Okay. So my belief is I rarely use automatic settings. And not that they're bad, because I mean, they're what everything is based on. But here are 3 images that were taken in July over at Baldwin Hill. The one on the left is an automatic exposure. That means that I have set my smartphone, or I set my DSLR, or I set my tablet to just photograph automatically. And what it does, it balances the image based on a series of averages. So the meters take the sun in the middle, the clouds up on top, the barn on the left, and create an average exposure that is okay. I mean, it's not okay for me, but it's okay for most people, and I have no problems with that. But what you can do very simply is to get a more correct image is over or underexpose very simply. If you're using a smartphone or a tablet, whether it's an Android or it's an Apple, if you put your finger on the screen and hold that screen for about 3 seconds, you're going to get a little sun-like icon that is going to, you slide it up or you slide it down. It's going up, it's going to make the image brighter. Going down, it's going to make the image darker. And my experience is that most really beautiful images that were taken of the sunrise or the sunset are always manipulated, exposing, bringing it down so that I'm getting a little bit of a richer image. And it works with a DSLR. On the DSLR, you have a number of tools. You have a thing called EV, and you may have another device called plus and minus. You could actually dial in overexposure and underexposure in brackets. So you could say, I want to shoot the first picture, what the auto exposure tells me, and then I want the next 9 pictures, which will be shot automatically, to be variations of both underexposure and overexposure. So if you set that correctly, you really are not going to have, you're not going to miss an image. And again, that is not a very complex element to do. And at the end of this presentation, if we have some time, if you have a specific DSLR, you have a question. There is also something that deals primarily with sunsets. It's called the golden hour. This was once an app. It is no longer an app. It is now just a website. The golden hour is technically the time prior to, within about an hour or an hour and a half, depending on the time of year and other conditions, the colors are at their most unique palette. And the golden hour is broken down into the golden hour, which roughly lasts about an hour. You have, in some instances, what they call the blue hour and the purple hour. And in some of these applications, they have what they call the red hour. And they all are not hour long. They are about 20 to 40 minutes long. But each one of these different segments tells you or shows you different uniqueness in the colors of the sky and the sunset. And if you go onto this, app, it will show you. Oh, does someone ask a question? No, okay. If you go onto this app, what we'll do, it will show you a world map with the 4 or 5 different colors of where you are. And again, it's a trackable device. Let me see if I can get it up. If I can get this thing online here without having craziness. Nope, that's not going to do it. All right, now that's the wrong page. All right, I'll put this aside for now. We'll try this at the end. Okay, yeah, you still haven't lost my page, right? Okay, so the golden hour will provide you with a wealth of information, and there are dozens of sites, and this is a link to one of them, that tells you how to increase the beauty of your imagery using the golden hour photography, okay? So here's another example. So this, now if you notice, the sun is significantly lower in the sky than it was in that first series. And I did the same thing. I've done an average, an under, and an overexposure. And depending on what you're on, editing is a very, very personal tool, so is photography. So you can sort of decide which one works best for you. But these 3 images took no time at all to create because, number one, I knew where I was. I knew I got there early. I knew where the sun was going to set. I knew what the angle and I knew what the speed of the sun setting was going to be. So when I set up my tripod with my camera, I used 2 cameras on this event, I was able to really run through this very, very quickly. And it is, again, it's you can go anywhere in between. These are sort of extremes. The average, the auto exposure is what it is, but the under and over are extremes. Anywhere between that is loaded with wonderful color and with a wonderful texture. Clouds are part of what you really need to focus on, but you can literally create a gorgeous image with relative ease. So here's a series excuse me, that I did with Baldwin Hill when I get there earlier. Now, I'm always, when you see what it says about when it says sunset, you want to get there about 45 minutes beforehand, which I'll discuss in the next slide. But here's a series of different shots while I was waiting for the sun to set. And you could see probably in a 20-minute period, I think it was exactly 20 minutes, from where the sun is in the upper left-hand photograph to where the sun is in the lower right-hand photograph, how much the sun has moved down the sky and how much the sky physically has changed. And again, I play with exposures because I'm not a person who likes to use auto exposure. Also, photographing sunsets behind clouds illuminates the cloud. So in portrait photography, there's this thing called backlight, which basically used to add a glow to the back of someone's head. You could do the same thing by positioning the sun. And if you're at a location where the sun is going to set behind a building, you can move your angle so that the sun is going to physically set behind the building and the building gets a wonderful glow behind it. Sort of what's happening in my virtual background here, that's the sun rising in Monument Valley. And you can see how it's defined the 2 buttes. Then there's a 3rd butte right there. How it's defined these buttes because it's backlighting, it's making a silhouette. Okay, so here's an example. So I selected Baldwin Hill because it's about 20 minutes from where I live. I always arrive at least an hour beforehand. Number one, I want to get the best location. And sometimes these locations are filled with photographers and I want to be where I can look at my compass heading and I can make sure I got the heading that I want. And again, it's when it falls below the horizon. You need to add about maybe another 45 to 50 minutes to maybe an hour onto that. So for me, an hour in advance is really something that I just built into my head. And since I did a lot of travel photography, a lot of editorial photography, I usually would only have a day or two to capture a great photograph. So I really couldn't get there 10 minutes beforehand and say, oops, I should have gotten there yesterday, right? So you really want to take that time and figure that out. And there's a couple of things that could enhance your capabilities. Number one, check the weather. So when you have skies that are going to be clear, like they were the other night, well, yesterday, it is going to be a gorgeous sunset. You're going to get this striation, sort of like behind me. You're going to get this incredible transition of color, but the sky is basically blank, right? But if you, for example, know that there is rain coming, or that you have high clouds or low clouds, or stratus clouds or cumulus clouds, even storm clouds, they all add to the depth and they all add to the wonder of the sunset or sunrise. So I always check the weather. And in the cheat sheet, there are a couple of links that will allow you to check the weather from a couple different standpoints. Checking the weather from a terrestrial standpoint is great, but checking the weather for airplanes, aviation, or for the marine industry is even better, because they focus on what is not at the Earth's surface. They tend to focus on what's above the Earth's surface and what's coming down the line. So if you look at the aviation forecast, you look at the marine forecast, you'll be able to determine wind speed, intensity of wind, and you'll be able to really create what I consider to develop a palette of a very, very wonderful photographic opportunity. So again, you need to be prepared. So I have a sunrise and sunset photography list that I keep just on my iPhone. And what I do is I check it off every time. Because, sometimes I run out of the house and I forget. So things that I don't want to have happen is I don't want to run to a location, Mount Greylock is an hour and 10 minutes away. I don't want to run. I have my checklist. I check it out. I verify it again. I consider clothing. The minute the sun sets throughout the year, the air temperature could drop anywhere from 10 to 20 or 30 degrees. And to give you an example, I was on Mount Washington in New Hampshire on Monday, and on the sea level versions of roughly 6,000 feet below, the temperature decreases 3.8 degrees for every 1,000 feet. So by the time we got to the top, it was 25 degrees cooler than it was on the bottom. With, in addition, the wind was blowing 60 to 72 miles an hour. 72 miles an hour is the threshold for Category 1 hurricane. So up on top, it was cold. And you want to be aware of that, because again, the last thing you want to do is go up there and have to take a quick shot because your hands are too cold. Same thing when the sun rises. Some people get out in the sun rising, and you'll see some shots later that I did, where it was so cold that I could hardly even stand myself. But the minute the sun came up, I was shedding clothing. So it's better to be layered than not to be layered. As I said, wind and clouds and weather conditions. One of the greatest times for sunsets is when you see rain in the next day or two. And if you want a natural hint of when rain is coming, is if you look at the sky, you see clouds that look like horsetails. There's a little line, then it flips up or flips down. That's almost a guarantee that within 48 to 72 hours, there's going to be rain. And usually the day before that, the clouds are building and you get some really, really unique compositions. Any questions so far? Is this moving okay, everybody? No questions? I'll continue. Okay. All right. So, this is the other thing that I tell people. Prior to clicking your shutter, don't even, looking at the sun, yes, but you should look all around you, because there's so many things going on that the sun impacts either in sunrises or sunsets. It is a region-wide, or what they call a universal-wide impact. The landscape changes, the colors of the trees change, the colors of the houses, the colors of the fields, colors of people starts to change. So look, I always look at the sun, I look to the right, to the left, I look up, I look down, and then I turn around to see what's behind me. Because sometimes there may be something behind me that's going to catch the rays of the rising or setting sun in such a unique way that it's going to be just stunning. So the sun may be rising and setting here, but there's a lot of stuff that's going on behind me. Also, sometimes by moving your camera angle up or down, you will change the impact of the sunrise or the sunset. And also, if you use a wide angle lens versus a telephoto lens, it changes the aspect of the entire image. So I'm going to show you a couple of. This was done on Herbert's Hill, part of Bart's Cobble, about 2 years ago. This is literally about 45 minutes to an hour before the sun was setting. Look at the beautiful yellow tones, the orange, on not only on the grass, but on the faces of the musicians. And you look at the clouds in the background, that's like a line of clouds that was moving from west to east. And it just gave this wonderful concept of where the sun was, what the sun was going to do. And you'll notice there are elongated shadows. So elongated shadows are, again, a wonderful thing to play with. But this is because this has nothing to do with me being a professional photographer, a master photographer. As Hildy said, this has to do with just the fact that I'm observing. I'm looking and I'm waiting and I'm willing to make changes, experimentation. I'm not going to just take one shot and walk away. So here's another series from Baldwin Hill where you'll see that I move the camera from center of the sphere of the sun. I moved the sun to the right, and that's done because I wanted to get this thing called the rule of thirds. But you could just see how dramatic it changes from when the sun was 25 degrees up in the sky. Here it's probably about 7, maybe 10 degrees. And then as it goes lower and lower and lower, the entire feeling, the entire personality of the imagery changes. So I'm going to go on to sunrises, but does anyone have any questions about sunsets? Okay. If you do, can just let me know. So, sunsets are great, and people often forget about how beautiful sunrises are. Now, the problem with sunrises are many of us are asleep. And so we're really not out there. So, sunsets, we don't need no stinking sunsets. You can get beautiful sunrises almost anywhere in the country. They are emphasized or they are amplified when there's water around. You'll see in this shot here, this is from Virginia Beach. This is a shot, the sun rising literally with a little bit of cloud structure. And again, this is a modified exposure, but literally location is critical as well. You want to be someplace where you're going to be able to use the light of the sun to amplify, to intensify, to add some level of more visual excitement to your image, right? Weather, again, important factor. Blue skies are great, but you know what? Skies with clouds are even nicer. Skies with incredible cloud structure is even nicer. If you look at some of the Renaissance painters from Italy and also even earlier and some later French painters, they played with the clouds. They captured skies that were majestic. And we had that same ability here by just paying attention to the weather. There is a tool called a variable neutral density filter that I would suggest if you're going to be serious about sunsets or sunrises, you consider purchasing. What it does, a variable neutral density filter brings down all the highlights without affecting anything that is not a highlight. So where you may have, and this photograph was shot with a neutral density filter. So where you may have the sun being so bright and white, with a variable neutral density filter cranked up to about 15, the sun, of course, that's a highlight, starts to become more within the dynamic range, and you are able to capture more tonality. Also, if you wanted to have another tool called a polarizing filter, when used at right angles to the sun, adds a lot of depth and reflection or takes reflection away from the water. For sunrises, the rules are essentially the same. You get your TPE, you look at the time of the sunrise, you want to be there at least an hour beforehand. My suggestion, if you're going to do sunrises, you should go to the location you're planning to make the photographs the day before during daylight to make sure there aren't any holes, there aren't any things that are going to sort of get you hurt or get you damaged. There are some average exposures. With sunsets, you could use these as a base, and I'll get into that in a second. But if you want to set your shutter speed to about 1/250th of a second, that's going to capture any sort of sliding motion. If you want to change your ISO to about 400 to 800, that gives you a beautiful medium range of quality. And your f-stop, which is what your depth of field is going to control, I usually start at 5.6 and play around with that. I rarely use automatic settings. So for me, I carry a hand meter, and what I will do is I will measure different parts of the scene, and I will photograph it based on those readings so I can get a different set of what's going on. Manually focus, so most of your cameras are autofocus, and on the lens there's an AF, MF switch. Most of the time you'll probably need to shift that to MF, manual focus, because the way these focusing devices work, they send out either ultrasound or infrared, and they need something sharp to bounce off of to focus. Oftentimes at sunrises and sunsets, there isn't enough of sharpness in the image, and you'll hear your camera going zit, 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 zit. So manual focusing it is the way to go, and you could preset that because nearly every image you're going to photograph is going to be at infinity, which is the furthest point of focus. And as I mentioned earlier, you could bracket it. You could set your exposure on auto, and then my camera, I could get up to 9 different bracket shots. So I could have everything from a third of a stop to basically 3 full stops and cover myself just to make sure that I'm not going to miss the image. So here's an example also of just watching what happens when the sun rises. I was leaving Monument Valley last January. It was 17 degrees below zero. It was really, really cold. The last thing I wanted to do was to be out there at any one time, but I did want to do some experimentation. So again, I've got images that I literally watched the sun rise from the right from the left to the right. The right is the sun just really peeking itself over the distant horizon. The shot in the middle, you can see by the brightness, the intensity of the sky. And on the one on the right, there's even more intensity. And then I continued that experimentation when I went to, the sun was now nearly fully up. And in the center shot, the sun was fully up. But the shot on the right, I again played with my exposure. So I tremendously underexposed so I could darken that silhouette. Now, again, this is a personal image, what you like and what you don't like, but you have the ability to manipulate that in almost any way you want. And here, just different examples of that. So this is, again, a slightly manipulated shot. If you notice, like right over here, there's this incredible, beautiful glow of the reflection on the mesa. You've got the highlights here with snow on the ground, the highlights here. And you'll notice the sun's not in this picture because the sun was way over to the left, and it didn't include the mesas. And I felt that without the mesas being involved, the picture was just a shot of some scrub grass with the sun rising behind it. So when I saw that, I shifted my vision to the left, and I shifted my vision to the right, and I photographed it without having the sun, which was located to my left. And there's nothing wrong with using an average exposure. This is literally that same shot with the sun up almost, I think it was like 15 degrees up, and it was shot with no manipulation. So you have this ability to change this around anytime you want. And like I said, at the end, if you've got specific questions about your camera, or your smartphone, I'll try to answer those for you. Okay, I'm going to show you a couple of different sunrise, sunset shots. I'll explain what I did, why I did it, and how I did it, and hopefully that will provide you with some inside knowledge on making this thing happen, right? Lake Patuxent. So this is when the sun is well above the western horizon. Excuse me for a second. And I shaded the sun by using a tree to block it, because I felt that when I looked at it, the blocking of the sun, the full exposure of the sun washed out the image. And my goal was to get this beautiful rowed sailboat sitting on the lake. I wanted that to be really the defining shot. So having the sun in your picture is one thing, but having the sun in your picture not physically visible can be a beautiful and a wonderful tool. So this is in Italy, and this is a unique situation because at a certain time of the year along the Mediterranean coast, you get these Scirocco winds that come off of Africa. And what they bring with them is they bring sand. And if you've been watching the fires that have been going on in California, you've probably seen an overabundance of photographs that the sky looks like this yellow-orange. Well, in California, it's a negative because that's all the ash that's being set up into the atmosphere. Here, this is sand. And if you check the weather forecast out, they could predict fairly accurately when a Scirocco will develop or when what they call a Sahara sandstorm will develop, and you could be ready for it. So I've sailed the Mediterranean a bunch of times, and one of my most memorable sails was from Barcelona to Mallorca and then on to Rome. But when we got to Menorca, we were told by the weather people that there was going to be a Sahara sandstorm that night. And I shot some pictures, and this happens to be one of them, because the sky was full of sand, so much full of sand, by the way, that I have someplace, I don't know where I did with it, I have a film vial, filled with sand from the Sahara that landed on the boat. So just knowing a little bit about where you're going to be, how you're going to be is important. This next shot is Laurel Lake in Lee. And the image here is real simple. I waited, this is like 45 minutes after the sun had fully set. So this is, one of those, it is not, it's astronomical. It's nautical, sorry. It's nautical time because the sun was well below. But if you'll notice the glow that's still there. Now, also, this is a longer exposure. I knew that the clouds, which you'll see here, the wind was blowing fairly strongly out of the north. So it was basically pushing the clouds. So with a long exposure, I eliminated some of the movement in the water, but because the clouds are moving faster, they are smeared like this. So if you take that into consideration, you can just be prepared that you've got strong winds from the north, the south, the east, the west, whatever it may be. They can directly or indirectly impact your image. Also, rather than shoot this with a horizon right centered in the middle, like many sunsets or sunrises are set, I put this little boat in the middle. So this is now called asymmetrical. It is not fully balanced. But look at this glow. I mean, again, whether you like the picture or not, that's really, for this is irrelevant, but just look at this tonality. Now, one of the things that you also should do when you're photographing sunrises or sunsets, your cameras have the ability to shoot what they call a raw image and a JPEG. You should shoot the image in both RAW and JPEG. It's an automatic computation the camera does. RAW images contain about 30% more data than JPEG images. And when you want something that has this very, very subtle tonality, you want as much data. It's called a data-rich image. And you don't need to have an expensive DSLR to get a great sunrise. This picture last May was done in Rock Hall, Maryland, and it was selected by the Maryland Department of Tourism, and they used it for their May 2019 image. It's done with a smartphone. So I was managing a sailboat down there, and I just came out of the shower to get the day going, and the sun was probably maybe 5-7 degrees above the horizon. Took out my cell phone, put my finger on, adjusted it to the point that I liked it, and pressed it, and it was done. And I uploaded it, and I used a hashtag, and about 20 minutes later, the Department of Tourism of Maryland said, we'd like to use this for the official shot for the month. Simple. I was just aware of it. And you can tell some beautiful clouds here. You've got some, these are all not high clouds, but you got some nice clouds developing. These in the background look like there's stratus. So that means there's probably something coming in. I remember it did get windy that afternoon. But you got a couple nice components. I got the reflection of the water. I've got this foreground. So these shots, again, are everywhere for all of us. They're not only for people who are professional photographers. This is actually from my front yard, and this is the height of the golden hour. This was taken last summer, about a year ago, maybe 10 months ago, and you could see there was weather coming in. So these clouds up here indicate weather. Well, this is all pointers. So weather was coming in, that's west. weather was coming in from the southwest. I knew about it. I read about it. These are lower clouds, but the sun at this time of year sets right about over here. Right now, where I am, it's setting over here. So no, that actually, yeah, it's setting over here. But I calculated the golden hour. I went onto the website and I looked at the time and I said, okay, what's going to be the best shot possible? And if you could see, look at this tonality in the wheat field. So it picks up the reflections here, bounces it off, it intensifies the green. And I'm going to show you how to play with this in the editing function. So I didn't do anything special. I got out, took my camera out. This is with a unique camera called an L16. And I shot it. I did a little bit of adjustment, but I was prepared. And that preparation is really critical. This is the Chester River in Chestertown, Maryland. Last September, actually a year ago this weekend, I gave a course on sunset photography from boats. I'm a sailboat. I love to sail. And I was on this packet, and people were shooting all the sunsets. And this is not genius shot. I knew where the sun was, checked my TPE. I knew what the clouds were going to be like. I knew what the sky was going to be like. And I shot a series of exposures that were both long and short, but I bracketed them. And this is the one that I like the best. And to me, there's a uniqueness to this. There's no direct sun setting in it, but you know something is happening. It could be a sunrise if you didn't know what the compass heading was, but it's a fairly simple image to do. This is what you call an asymmetric image, in the sense that if you turned it upside down, it would look like you had the picture right as well. But again, when people tell you not to photograph directly into the sun, you really shouldn't listen to them. You should do that with care, not going yourself blind or burning out your sensors. But photographing into the sun is a unique opportunity. And you'll see here the sun is blown out. It's overexposed, but yet the reflection in the water is more realistic. So you could, again, play with that. This has no manipulation whatsoever. This is done with one of my cameras, no manipulation whatsoever. And it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you're up here in the country or you're in New York City. So again, I used to sail, I used to manage a sailboat from the 79th Street Marina. This is downtown on what is this, the Pier 25. That's the sun well below the horizon looking west into Jersey City. Now, again, not the greatest shot in the world, but there's a beauty to it. There's a softness to it. It takes the viciousness of being in the city away, because this is sort of like the land of Oz to me. It was just so magical because of the slight tonality of it. Again, unmanipulated. This is a shot, I forgot where this is. So these clouds indicate that there is going to be, these are stratus clouds. There's the sun. These clouds indicate that there's going to be some sort of weather coming in. If they were a little bit more, they were a little bit smaller circulating motions here, they would be called scallops, which means it's going to get cold. But I think this was in at Bart's Cobble, but I don't remember where I exactly shot this. But again, nothing special. I knew that there was going to be weather coming in. I knew what time the sun was going to be setting. I knew where the sun was going to be. You can see the sun right here, right? And I knew that those low clouds were going to diffuse the sun out, and I was able to simply get this pretty silhouette image. This is from Namkeg. This is if you're on the lawn at Namkeg. You know, we're talking about the Trustees location. This is when the sun is behind the mountain, but not behind the horizon. So you can see that tonality. You can see there's a lot of light here, because even though it looks like the sun went behind the horizon is off the picture. The horizon is way, way, way down outside the photograph. So this is the actual sun itself. The sun was right here. And this beautiful gradation goes up. And that's one of the reasons you want to shoot in RAW, because if you shoot in JPEG, you lose some of this transition. You lose some of the striations that make this picture just wonderful. Also, time of year doesn't matter. I'm going to be giving a course for IS 183 in January of photographing snow during someplace, hopefully it's going to be snowy. So this is actually down at Bart's Cobble. And this is just hiking one of the trails there in the wintertime. And if you overexpose slightly, the snow has a much more glow to it than it does if you just use your automatic exposure. But you notice how the shadows are leading towards me because I'm tracking the sun as it's down there. So time of year has little to do with the beauty of that. This was an accidental shot. I'm riding on the back road from my house. I'm going to Sandusfield, not for anything for the art center, but for Sandusfield. And I totally forgot that there was going to be fog forecast for the morning. And I'm just driving down the road, and the road is right here. Right, that's the road. That's County Road. And I'm driving down County Road, and all of a sudden I say, "Oh my gosh!" Stop the car, back the car up, waited for another car to pass me. And I had a little bit of time. Took out my smartphone. No, I'm sorry. Took out my traditional camera, and I made 1 or 2 exposures, and I've got what I consider a really beautiful, moody shot. So again, it doesn't take genius. It just takes observation and a little bit of thought process to do it. But you're all geniuses anyway, right? So you're going to get great photographs. Okay, so now I was at a boat show in Florida a couple of years ago, and this is Dawn in Fort Lauderdale, and I didn't want to go with the traditional. I wanted the composition to be framed by the pine tree. But look at all these beautiful clouds, and look what happens. Here's the sun rising right there. But look what's happened. I'm getting to see this gorgeous tonality, and look what's coming out, blue skies. It turned out to be a gorgeous day. It also doesn't matter where you are. This is on a sailboat. I was sailing. This is actually into Sardinia, and the sun just rose while we were on the Mediterranean. And again, the sun there's no detail, but you got these beautiful stars that are coming out because there was mist in the air, got some clouds in the distance, and I love this reflection. And the fact that I'm a sailboat makes it even better. Or if you're not sailing, you're at a dock. This is in Montauk, Long Island. This is the Montauk Yacht Club, looking east because it's a sunrise, and you can see what you could do just by knowing a little bit about what's going on, where it's going on. So I'm going to move to fall colors. But anyone have any questions about sunrises and sunsets? All right. Well, you guys are listening, paying attention. There is a test. Okay. So let me just take a sip of water. Okay, so the key with fall colors is the setup. Depending on where you are, and I've given you, there'll be a couple of links that I'm going to give you. Number one, New England has this website called Discover New England, and part of it talks about fall foliage maps, and they're fairly accurate. And they're a great start. So for example, when I was up in New England on Monday, I'm in New Hampshire on Monday, I started to see a significant number of trees changing color, about 50% more that's down here. So more than likely, because we had a dry spring that affects the intensity of color, the colors this year will probably start changing dramatically a little bit earlier than Columbus Day, all right? But this is a great way to start your trek. And again, this is include a structural map of the entire New England. These are available, maps like this are available for any part of the country that has fall changing colors. You have to search for what you're looking for. Then you've got some situations like this guy here. He puts this together himself, and what he does, he combines weather with the droughts, with the overwatering of flowers, whatever it may be, and he concludes and he comes up with his own way of linking this to photography. So with just these two, you get a really good start. Though I'm going to give you some other ones at the end of the presentation. Key is, again, equipment. You don't want to go out there with batteries that aren't fully charged. Yesterday, I gave a course in Connecticut, and one of the people came in and realized their battery was totally dead. Luckily, we were able to do a jump charge for them, but you want to make sure your batteries are set, your lenses are clean, your camera is operating, and you have enough of data on your card to take a lot of pictures. If not, have a spare card. With your smartphone, you want to make sure it's charged up. You may want to have a tripod. You may want to use some different apps, but there's nothing that you cannot use as far as photographics go for capturing sunrises, sunsets, or fall colors. Smartphones, tablets, DSLR, film systems. I use film a lot. I have a dark room in my house, right? And though I don't process my own color film, what you could do today with old color film is just phenomenal. Instant film. I love instant film. I got a couple of instant film cameras. It's a very, very cool thing. And I also love pinhole cameras. And pinhole cameras provide a slightly out of focus image of what is out there. So it becomes more creative, more fine art than anything else. So I'm going to go over these in a little bit more detail. So here are your creative options. If you're using a camera, you probably have, if it's a DSLR of anywhere, if it's not older than 5 years, it has a setting either on the dial on top or in your menu that says scenes, or it has icons. And those icons, for example, you might see one looks like a maple leaf. That is traditionally used for fall colors. But these scenes are pre-programmed to give you the best exposure based on the specific scene that they are going to capture. So you might have a sunrise and a sunset. Many of you do. You may have a moonrise. You may have a sky icon, which is usually a moon with a star next to it. You may have a couple of leaves mounted on top of each other, which is again fall colors, or you may have some that say fall colors, or that say fall sky, or that say vivid colors. These allow you to intensify the colors that the fall offers with really no effort whatsoever. On your smartphone, you have a couple of different options, and like I said, I'm going to be editing a couple of pictures online after this just to show you, but you have the ability, for example, to use in smartphone a thing called filters. And filters are illustrated in your smartphone camera by a series of 3 usually gray circles. If you tap the gray circles, you're going to get a series of screens that are going to say original, and you're going to have all these different pre-programmed color changes. Again, I'll show you that when I do editing. It works on smartphones by Apple, Android, Google, whoever. They have the same function. That alone will provide you with an incredible array of changing the colors around. Again, you'll see that, excuse me, when I do online editing. A tool, if you're using a traditional camera, though now many of these filters are available for smartphones and tablets, is a graduating filter. Graduating filter changes the color either from the top down or the bottom up in various percentages. It could be a slow transition from the top down or a fast transition. There are special effects filters that emphasize certain colors, that de-emphasize others. There are filters that provide sparkles, that provide glow, that provide a little bit of almost they call bokeh, a little bit of out of focusness to this. I mentioned neutral density filters. They give you a broader range of controlling the color. Polarizing filters, when used with the sun sort of at right angles to where you're photographing, intensify the blues and the greens, will bring the clouds out, will intensify the color of just about everything. A UV and a sky filter or a sky enhancing filter will also, if you're shooting later in the day, will make the sky slightly darker and the trees will be a little bit more lively. So you have tremendous opportunities. If you're into post-production, depending on what post-production system you use, you have tonal ranges, you have curves, you have temperature, you have tint. You have about 20 different tools that could increase the photographs. Like I said, I'm going to do that online with 4 or 5 photographs to show you how significantly different you could change the photographs. Today, a photograph that's taken does no longer have to stay like that. You could change it in dozens of ways, make it less dynamic, more dynamic, whatever makes you sort of happy. So here are some images that are full colors, and I'm going to work with some of these later on. This is a reflection. I love reflections, and there are reflections nearly everywhere. So instead of me looking directly ahead, I looked down and saw this puddle. And I didn't use a polarizing filter, and I think I'll play with this later on, but you can just see the colors that are here. This is probably, I don't remember the exact date on my notes, but this is probably, because we still have algae, we still have the water, we still have green on some of the trees, but you got a nice little pattern, we have greens here, so this is probably a year ago, right? Strategic shot, wide shot. Then, I told you about looking into the sun. The sun is directly behind these leaves. This is on Bash Falls, which, by the way, is considered the #1 state park in Massachusetts. Bash Falls along the trail have these maple leaves, and rather than use the sun as a part of the effort, I use the sun to intensify the color. Sun, basically light at this time of day, is more yellow than it is white, and this is in the morning. And so what I did is I used that to emphasize the tonality. The time of day you go to photograph fall colors is important as well. There is an app called Light Spectrum Pro. Light Spectrum Pro measures the color of light throughout the day for you. So if you go out in the morning, you're going to see it's more yellowish and red. It starts to get more white around noontime. It's very, very bright, very, very white. And when you go to the afternoon, it gets more blue, then it gets orange and red. If you want to emphasize the orange and red, you shoot early in the morning or late in the afternoon, because during the daytime, you're going to be taking away some of the color. But there's a way of bringing that back. This is a shot, again, the sun is behind me to my left shoulder, and it's hidden by a bunch of trees. And it's not a great shot, but I'm going to show you what I could do with this shot in editing just by manipulating a couple of simple controls. Again, I love close-ups and smartphones. This was done with a smartphone. Smartphones can go up to about 2 inches away from an item before the item is out of focus. And here's dew on the tree, on the tree leaf. And again, how did I know it is going to be dew? Because the day before I checked the weather and it said that the dew point was going to be at a certain percentage, and that usually tells you there's going to be water around, right? Another shot of leaves on green grass. Again, sort of bland for me. There's not enough of contrast, but I could play with that later on. Again, looking at the sun. This is called partially selective focusing. This beautiful maple tree leaf is the real sharpest part of it. And I picked that primarily because the different colors, but you can see the range of colors here. Again, it's a little bit dull, and you can sort of see by the sky, there's probably clouds. There's not a lot of blue in the sky. And lastly, before we get into some of the editing functions, again, simple shot, right? Okay. So any questions on fall imagery? No? All right. I'm going to, let me see. I'm going to, let's see. I'm going to open up, and I'm using the program to edit. That is the Apple program. I'm not going to use any fancy program, but I'm going to use the Apple program. So what I've done is I've got some images on my desktop that are over here, and I'm going to pick 1 or 2 images out, maybe 3 or 4, and edit them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import a picture, and it's going to give me the images on my desktop, which is right here. And let's see, here we have, let's do this one. I'm going to take 1 at a time. Now, the problem with these programs is that it puts it back into.
Excuse me, Thaddeus.
Yes,
Thaddeus,
yes.
I'm not seeing that on my screen.
I'm going to change that in a second. All right, let me try to move that around. Let me do a screen share again. You share, okay. Tell me if you see it now. You see a series of imported images?
Yes,
Can someone tell me what they see?
I see
You
a
can, okay.
file list.
So you see there's a bunch of images up
Yep.
here, right?
Yes.
You see the
Yes,
image
I
just
see it too.
sent here, which is the image with, good, okay. So this is shot with the sun to my left, shot through a bunch of trees. I hit the edit button, right? I have an option here. The first thing that I could do is I could go to filters up on top, and tell me if you're not seeing this. I want to make sure you all see this. And I could show you here, this is the original view. All right, I want to increase the yellows and the oranges. Watch what's going to happen to this picture by a single click. What do you think? Not bad, right? I saw a smile on that face. That's good. So I could also decide I want it even different, or I want it cooler. I'll go back to warm, right? So just by a single click, I can intensify. And this is not magic. What's happening is the editing program is emphasizing the specific colors that are in the image. If I decide I don't want to do that, I go back to the original. And then what I could do is I want to sort of start this all over again. I have all of these controls here in my my photos editing function. So I could, for example, I could weaken or intensify. Go back to where it was, right there. Or I have the ability to play with the color rendition. See what's happening? The greens and the oranges. I could play with that. I could go to where we have this thing called curves, and I could drag this curve up or down. I could change this mood just by playing with a picture. So maybe I would make it like it looks like it's darker, right? So I've done that. Then I could go back up into here, and I could play with other things like exposure. I could play with highlights. Highlights are going to make things that are lighter than 50% brighter. There's not too much here. Or I could increase the brightness of the entire image. Takes everything up there. I could play with contrast, which is the difference between the deepest black and the deepest white. So you see what's happening here? That almost looks like a painting. It's almost like a muted painting. But these are the color capabilities you have to do that. You have the ability also to select only specific colors to manipulate. So this is going to manipulate only the green part of the spectrum. So I've taken a lot of the green out. Look how that rust has appeared. Now I can go back and I say, well, what can I do with the red part? Because photos are made of RGB, and I can take the red totally out, or I can intensify the red. So just because this photograph was created, it by no means it's done. I have the ability to create it and recreate it anytime I want. I'm going to do a couple more. Do you have any questions so far? Where is the, let's see.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Thaddeus,
What's the question? Yes.
I'm just curious, could you put back that scene in black and white?
Sure. Let me get that picture. So you have the ability, I got it here it is. You have the ability at any time to select black and white a couple different ways. One, you could select it in your smartphone, tablet, or camera before you take the picture, or you could select it. Let me revert to the original. There we go. Or you could select it in filters by sliding down or up, depending. And there are 3 versions of black and white on most editing systems. The first is monochrome. Monochrome does not have any true whites or any true blacks. It is really primarily grays. So from the left to the right, it's going to go from grays to almost pure white. Silvertone is a technique that adds a little shine to it. You can see the difference here. If you watch this tonality difference here, right? But the one that I like best, because I love film noir movies, is noir, which gives you real blacks and real whites. And again, you could go in and you could change this as well. So I could say adjust, and now I could manipulate it in black and white as much as I want to manipulate it. So I've taken a scene that looked like it had a lot of leaves in it, and now I've eliminated some of those leaves. Does that answer your question? Yep, excellent. Okay.
Thank you.
Nope, my pleasure. Let's go back and let's go back to imports. And where is it? Where'd they all go? Where'd they go? Huh. I lost them. Not surprising. Okay. That is strange. All right, well, let me import another one, that's all. Let's see, I just did that. Now, let me just figure something out here. For some reason, these are not transferring. Let's see why this is not transferring. Okay. Okay. All right. I'm going to save this. Rename. Let's see if that's going to work. Rename. Put the A there. That's all. Okay. Let's see if I can import this one. I'm not sure what happened with them, but A. Here we go. Okay. That should be in my import folders, and it should be here someplace. There it is. Okay. So this is the image I showed you before. This is really no manipulation. But if I go to edit, now I can't add polarization. Polarization would reduce or increase these shadows. But what I can do is exposure-wise, I could darken or lighten it, right? So if I darken it, but then I could go into contrast, and I could give it a little bit more light, and then I can play with color. So you see what I've done? I've changed a shot that was sort of bland in here. I manipulated the greens, maybe a little bit intense. The maple leaves are sort of defined, but I could change that at any stage in the process. So just because I shot it and it didn't come out the way I want it to be, doesn't mean it can't be repaired. So another shot, this one here, this is a shot of the maple leaf. I could drag, I can make it brighter, I can make it darker. Notice what's happening? When you get darker, you're getting significant more roundness to the leaf, right? And then I can look over here and I say, what happens if I increase the shadows? So now you notice this has become a little bit brighter, but I could also play with the brightness and see what that does. I mean, to me, that makes a more interesting photograph because the leaf is almost jumping out at me. And then I could go and I could alter the color. I could say, oh, let's make this whole thing. Now, you notice what's happening here, more blues appearing. Or I can go black and white. All right? Okay. Let me get one more here. Now, there are shots like this here that I'm not going to be able to really make a significant difference in the area here because the shot was made for the sun. So I can make it darker, but making it lighter, it's not really making much difference. I'm losing the sun, right? But I could go up here and I could just drag it around and see which is a nicer shot. So again, I don't know if you like this. I don't like it because I think it's too hot in the middle. But I like this a little bit better. And then I could play with exposure and I can make it a little bit more interesting. So again, once you have this capability, there is no reason why you can't change things any way you want. You also have this issue of color saturation. You see what's happening to the blues and to the oranges? So I take all the color out, but now I'm actually intensifying the color. And again, maybe you like that, maybe you don't like that, but it's a sort of cool way. Now, Apple, I heard that Apple is going to be shortly introducing an even more robust editing program. So I can also change a cast. So you can see the color changing slightly, right? More rendition. Let's see, here we go, this one here. So I can change color. You see how the color is just slightly changing? And I could go to brilliance. So there's no reason why, just because you took a photograph, that you can't fix it or change it or modify it after you're done. So I'm going to go back to the presentation. Anybody have any questions?
So Thad,
Yes.
people still need Photoshop, or you know what? Because it looks like you're able to do a lot with.
So the only thing you really can't do in this program is you can't replace items easily. So for example, if I wanted to, let's see, let me just go back to original, okay? If I wanted to, if I wanted to retouch it, meaning that I wanted to, let's say I wanted to remove some of these leaves, it's not as easy here as it is in a Photoshop or in a program like Lightroom. So you see that? That's because I didn't apply the area what I wanted to select. And this is a problem that I have with this program is that you're supposed to do an option point here, and now that's supposed to replace, let's see, click option. Option, click, which I did right there. And then let's see if this works. But to answer your question, no, you don't necessarily need to purchase. That's a little bit better. You don't necessarily need to purchase, let me try to fix that, Photoshop, but you have to be aware that this is not as robust as a program as Photoshop. If you're interested in placing items in here, that becomes a bit more difficult. So if you're going to do some basic editing, this is more than enough. But if you want to do some enhanced editing, then a Photoshop or a Lightroom would be better. Apple has added a bunch of things, selective color. You can now select colors that you want to only play with the greens. I don't know if you see what's going on there, right? I mean, I can make that look like, that looks like winter now, right? The grasses turn yellow. The leaves are more orange and yellow. I could change it again. I could add some brilliance to them. And I could then compress the range. So that picture, does it look like the grass is green? No. So again, you have this capability. And then if you don't like it, you go back to revert to original and it goes right back. That answer your question, Hildy?
It did. And so also, if you don't have a Mac or an Apple device, then on the PC, I don't think there's anything comparable without getting Photoshop.
No, there is. So with one of the things that makes Macintosh a better system or Apple a better system is that it's consistent from device to device.
Mm-hmm.
So I could do the same level of editing, about 80% of it on my iPhone. I could do about 85% of it on my iPad, but I could do 100% on my laptop. All of these photo programs, whether it's Google has Google Paint, Google Draw, they all have an editing system. The difference is that if you're looking for a non-Apple editing system, you normally have to go into Edit, and it's often called Palette, or it's often called Pro, but you could do these same functions on all platforms. The difference is that Mac made it a little bit more easier for most people, but you can do this on any platform available.
Thanks. Great.
All right, I'm going to go back to, let's get this thing up here. And subtitles, get rid of that. Okay. So you should be able to see that's a slide that says editing, filters, tools. Have you seen that or not? Hildy?
Yes, seeing it.
You see editing, filters, and camera tools? Or not?
Yep.
You do? Okay. All right. So there's a couple different ways that you could edit. Number one, you could do what I just did here. I could take my photograph and I could edit it, whether it's in my camera, in my smartphone. In some cameras, you could edit literally in the camera. You could edit in all smartphones, all tablets, and on nearly all laptops. You could use a series of filters to make it very simple, where before you take the picture, when the fall comes over, before you take the picture, change the vivid warm, and it's going to look like it's orange. And if you don't like it later on, you just go back to original, and it will actually reproduce the image the way it was originally seen, not the way you originally made it. Some cameras have in-camera tools like scenes. So if you have a Nikon, a Canon, a Sony, an Olympus, whatever it may be, you have the ability to dial in certain presets. And they could be something that says fall colors. I mean, Sony has been very aggressive. Sony has moon shots, planet shots, nighttime people, nighttime landscape. So all these shots are available for you to use. And I could show you an example of that at the end. So just because you took the picture, you're not limited. It is there for you to use however you want to use it. So, summary, the key is just understanding its preparation. If you go out there knowing what time the sun's going to set, what the weather conditions are, what the structure of the sky is going to be, where you're going to be, what equipment you're going to be using, you're really there. You need to have a little bit more understanding of your equipment, because oftentimes when you're shooting sunsets, it gets dark quick, and sun rises. it stays dark for a lot longer than you think, and you may forget where certain controls are. If you use a white light, your eye is going to be shut for 45 minutes. You use a red light, but most of your cameras have some sort of device that allows you to manipulate the controls on that. For me, time of day, time of year, weather, special effects. You can buy tons of filters. You could zoom in and out. If you have your camera on a tripod, you could do what they call a slow zoom. You set your shutter speed to a slow shutter speed, and you zoom the camera in, zoom the camera out, and you'll get this incredible, gorgeous blur that literally looks like it's something that came from the gods, you know? And then again, you want to establish your own personal vision. These are two sites I actually just found this morning. A friend of mine sent me the Connecticut one. So there's a Connecticut drive. It's 2 hours long. This will be part of the cheat sheet. It's a 2 hour long drive, and basically you drive through Western Connecticut, down to the middle, back around again. And for us, I found this morning that Massachusetts has a series of tours that they recommend. They all vary from 1 hour to literally a whole day. If you want a copy of the cheat sheet, my email address is there. It's Thad, T-H-A-D, @tbkphotos.com, and I will gladly send that to you. I'm going to jump to one more slide. We have got one more slide after this to talk to you about. If you have any questions, ask me now, or I'm going to leave my email address and my phone number up there. Feel free to call me, ask me questions. We ended up a little bit early. We had this down for 2 hours. We would get it done in an hour and a half, but I'm available for questions. And if you have specific questions about your DSLR or your smartphone, I'm willing to answer them. All right? Hildy, I'm turning it over to you.
Oh, Thad. So I just had a comment because I'm not a photographer, but so much of what you said is applicable for just observing, and applicable to painters, applicable to poets, applicable to anybody who wants to go out and see more than what you normally see. So, you know, the specifics of photographing are wonderful, but I just see this as having a much more wide application. I'm going to share the recording with some friends of mine who are painters and poets.
Yeah, you are 100% correct. I've often spoke to poets and writers about doing a book where I photograph what they see at different times of the day, what they write, we put it together. But yes, you know, years ago I was in Heidelberg, Germany, and there's this walk called the Philosopher's Walk that is above the Nectar River. And it is where many, many famous German philosophers, you know, in the 1800s would just walk around because they would get these ideas. And you're right, it is an inspirational time, but you need to be aware and you need to sort of observe what's going on. So getting down to a beach when the sun is rising will probably mean you're getting out of your car at the wrong time. But getting down to the beach an hour beforehand and just being there when the sun, you could also, there's an emotional thing that happens, at least to me. I feel, when I'm photographing sunrises, I feel, particularly when it was 17 below zero in Monument Valley, I actually felt the heat on my face. Now, my face was the only thing that was visible, so I had gloves on or whatever else. But I actually felt that warmth of the sun, and that sort of energized me to keep on going. And the same thing happens at night. It becomes, when the sunset happens, it becomes almost mystical, magical, because you're saying that for thousands of years, everybody thought that the earth was going, well, the sun was going someplace and it was coming back the next day because the world was flat, right? Now you understand the logic of it, and you see this incredible beauty. And that happens with everything. And with the fall colors, as much as I like when it's intense, like usually around the second to third week in October, depending, I like it when it's starting to change, when I still got the mix of green in there. And it's very emotional, very moving, very creative, very spiritual. There's a bunch of terms I could use. But yes, it doesn't only have to be with photography. I'm relearning to draw, right? So one of the things that I'm working on is what time of year would I like to do it. I decided that if I want to get into painting, that's the best time of year for me because such a variety of color. So yeah, you're 100% correct.
That's fantastic.
Many options are available.
So I wonder if,
Any other?
thank you once again. Alan, Barbara, Rick, Arthur, any questions for Thad while we're here?
Yeah. Hi, hello.
Yes?
Thad, this is Barbara.
Hi, Barbara.
We're not seeing
By
you.
any
We're
chance,
seeing,
Alan?
I see your puppy walking around.
You can see him, but not me?
Yes.
That's one of the many. So many people have sort of book clubs that they go to once a month. Is there something here that you run, or, you know, like a photography club where people could get together and exchange all this information and go out and sort of support one another with this?
So I don't run a club per se. I do offer these things, which are called, I call them walks. and what I would do is I usually announce on my Facebook page, I'm going to be doing a walk for sunsets or sunrises or a town walk or whatever it may be. And, you know, whoever wants to show up, meet me here at a certain time, and we'll go hiking or walking or photographing. I'm not a big one for clubs for a lot of different reasons, but I do, like I said, IS 183 has asked me to create 4 walks for them. Now, the walks you're going to have to pay for, but my walks, we just get together and we do photography and talk. And I'm going to probably do one. I'll probably do one in early October once I understand where when the colors are going to be at their best. So if you send me an email or if you follow me on Facebook, the picture you want to see with me is me with very, very dark sunglasses on. That's my main Facebook page. I will probably announce that at the end of September. But yeah, I do these things, but I'm not into clubs. Clubs are too restricted for me. So
How about a cemetery? How about a cemetery walk at Halloween?
fun.
For the benefit of the Arts Center.
Yeah, that's fine. Just let me know when. And let me show you something. I'll show you unique. Let me show you something unique about cemeteries, and I will get back to this in a second. So I've been experimenting with a type of film that is really no longer available. They just reintroduced it, and it is called Type New 55. And what it does, it creates imagery that is, it creates imagery that gives you a negative and a positive using a 4x5 camera. So I was experimenting with it in cemeteries. So yeah, I'm game for a cemetery walk. Just let me know where and when.
All right, Alan. Alan, you're on.
Did you see those pictures? I'm not sure. I just realized you probably didn't see those pictures. Did you see them or not?
We saw
they were there.
the cemetery.
Yeah. Okay. No. So they definitely, if you want to do that, yeah, I'll do it. What are you saying? Which cemetery?
We're going to follow up on it. Yes.
Hello?
We'll definitely follow up.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, no, cemeteries are cool because number one, you got these gorgeous shapes. There's a lot of motion you could use by if it's windy, the leaves. You could use infrared film or infrared filters, and you could actually determine if there are ghosts in cemeteries or not. But no, it's fun. Yeah, just let me know. We'll work that out.
Thank you, Thad. This was great. Thank you very much. Great seeing everybody else. And it was just in time because the leaves have started. So
that was the whole purpose of it. Fantastic.
Yeah, no, brilliant.
Well, enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you. Wonderful presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thad.
Bye, Arthur. Bye, everyone.
Send your emails if you want the cheap.
Yeah, I'll leave that. You got that up,
Hello.
right? That at tbkphotos.com. I'll send you the cheat sheet.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Good.